A woman from Turkey recently underwent surgery to have 35 olive pits, 28 date seeds, and 5 stones removed from her digestive tract. She was experiencing severe abdominal pain, leading to the discovery that she'd been swallowing various pits and seeds for decades. After narrowly avoiding death due to the complications, she's now vocal about urging people to never swallow large seeds. In the weeks leading up to D-Day, General Eisenhower was under so much stress that he'd been smoking 6 packs of cigarettes, drinking 24 cups of coffee, and averaging just 2 hours of sleep every day. In the 1950s, 3 campers were found dead at their campsite in Oregon without any sign of struggle. Investigators were stumped until they soon found a dead newt in the hunter's coffee pot. They likely died after drinking the coffee, since newts can produce a toxin that's 10,000 times more potent than cyanide. Ancient Greek lawmaker Charondas issued a law stating that anyone who brought weapons into the Athenian assembly would be executed. One day after hunting in the countryside, he entered the assembly without knowing that his hunting knife was still attached to his belt. He then promptly took his own life to uphold his own law. In 2001, Ashton Kutcher had a girlfriend who was murdered by a serial killer after being stabbed 35 times in her own home. Kutcher would end up testifying in the trial of the Hollywood Ripper, who would later confess to murdering at least 10 women over a 15-year span. Author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave. She also kept her dead husband's heart and carried it around for 30 years until her own death. According to the FBI, if you're murdered in the United States, there's only about a 40% chance that your killer will be found and punished. In 2009, a Russian man went to the doctor suspecting that there was something wrong with his lungs. Initially, doctors thought they were dealing with a tumor, but it ended up being something they'd never seen before. It turned out that years ago, the man accidentally inhaled the seed of a fir tree and it started growing inside of him. This is a photo of a captive orca whale named Tilikum staring down its trainers at SeaWorld. There have only been 4 human deaths caused by orcas to date, and Tilikum was responsible for 3 of them. In one instance in 2010, 40-year-old Don Brancho leaned over his tank during something known as a relationship session. That's when the 11-ton orca took her in his mouth, dragged her into the water, and violently killed her in front of hundreds of terrified tourists. Even when SeaWorld staff members had trapped and netted him, Tilikum refused to let go of the body. It's believed his hostility was caused by a total accident that happened just minutes prior to the attack. Tilikum performed a trick that Dawn didn't see, so she didn't reward him with fish as she normally would. This, coupled with the psychological damage of living in captivity, resulted in the orca's unnatural aggression. This is the facial reconstruction created from a severed human head found in an Illinois park in 1993, the only clue investigators had for nearly 3 decades. The victim remained unidentified until 2022, when DNA genealogy revealed she was Susan Lund, who disappeared on Christmas Eve in 1992 after walking to a nearby store. Despite finally learning her name almost 30 years later, the rest of her body was never recovered. No suspect was ever charged, and her murder remains unsolved. This is a decorative tower filled with thousands of shaved human jawbone fragments, removed from patients during cosmetic jaw reduction surgeries in South Korea. The display came from a Seoul plastic surgery clinic, where the surgeon stacked discarded pieces of patients' faces into stacked columns to represent how many operations he had performed. The towers sparked public backlash and were later removed after authorities fined the clinic for violating medical waste laws requiring human remains to be incinerated. The case became a disturbing symbol of how normalized extreme facial alteration has become in South Korea, to the point that many patients have even reported being questioned at border control because their faces no longer match their passport photos. This has to be the strangest disorder I've ever heard of by far. Body integrity identity disorder is a rare neurological condition that causes the patient to believe that one or more of their limbs does not belong to them. This sense of disconnection often begins in early childhood, with sufferers reporting an intense and persistent desire to remove or disable the offending limb. Some patients become so distressed that they attempt self-amputation, using power tools, shotguns, or dry ice to damage the limb beyond repair. Renowned cricket historian Roland Bowen famously severed his own leg in 1968 while suffering from this disorder, and in the late 90s, Scottish surgeon Robert Smith controversially performed amputations on healthy patients who begged him to cut off one of their limbs. In many of these cases, patients report an indescribable sense of relief and psychological alignment following the removal of the unwanted limb. For them, the amputation is not a loss, but a long-sought correction in the harmony between their physical form and internal identity. This 1998 photo was taken in Omagh, Ireland, just minutes before a bomb placed in the red car exploded. 29 people were killed by the blast and another 220 were injured. The cameraman of the photo died, but the man shown with his daughter happened to survive. A healthy human heart can only beat for about 1 minute when removed from the body, but the heart of a coke user can beat for up to 25 minutes outside of the body. In 2011, a 17-year-old boy jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge to impress his friends. The jump has a 98% death rate, but the boy survived with only minor bruising. In 1980, 7-year-old Anna Bachmeyer was sexually assaulted before being strangled to death by her 35-year-old neighbor. During the trial, Anna's mother opened fire in a crowded courtroom and murdered the man. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but was released after 3. Horseshoe crabs have been around for 450 million years and have blue blood. Instead of hemoglobin, their blood contains hemocyanin, which gets its blue color from oxygenated copper. Their blood is so valuable to the medical industry that a gallon costs around $60,000. The sting of the tarantula hawk wasp is so unbearable that victims are often advised to lie down and start screaming to avoid further injury. In 2018, Russian scientists collected and analyzed 300 prehistoric worms from Arctic permafrost. After being thawed, 2 of the worms began to move and eat. Both of the worms are estimated to be well over 30,000 years old. This Pleistocene wolf is so well preserved that it looks like it could still be snarling today. It was found in Siberian permafrost, in the spot that it likely died some 40,000 years ago. This 2,000-year-old Roman bathhouse found in Algeria is still in use today. This is a sample of amber containing the bone, tissue, and feathers of a coelurosaur from the Cretaceous period. Researchers believe that this has the potential to be the most conclusive evidence so far that dinosaurs were feathered. In 2021, Lady Gaga's dog walker Ryan Fisher was walking 3 of her French bulldogs in Hollywood when he was suddenly attacked by 2 men. After being shot in the chest, which resulted in permanent damage including the partial loss of a lung, he still tried to protect the dogs, but 2 of them were taken. Gaga later offered a $500K reward for the return of her pets, and 2 days later, a woman brought the dogs to an LA police station. The woman was later arrested along with 4 others in connection with the crime and tried to sue Gaga for not paying the reward money, asking for the $500K plus another $15 million for financial damages, pain and suffering, mental anguish, loss of enjoyment of life, and legal fees. She claimed that she never would have returned the dogs if not for the promised reward, and was therefore defrauded because she ended up with no dogs and no reward. The woman ended up losing the case, while shooter James Jackson pleaded no contest to attempted murder and was sentenced to 21 years in prison. One of serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer's victims nearly escaped his gruesome fate. In 1991, a 14-year-old boy named Konorak ran naked into the street, heavily drugged and covered in blood. In his brain-injured state, Konorak struggled to explain his situation when authorities arrived. Dahmer eventually found the boy with the police and convinced them that the boy was his 19-year-old lover. Despite bystanders pleading for his life, the officers returned the boy to Dahmer's apartment. They noticed a strange smell in the apartment, which was the decaying corpse of a previous victim in the bedroom, but made no attempts to investigate. Later that evening, Dahmer sexually abused, killed, and dismembered the boy. In 2007, the Coble family lost their 2 girls and 1 boy in a horrific car accident. A year later, the mother gave birth to triplets, 2 girls and 1 boy. The reason The Beauty and the Beast was written was to help young girls accept arranged marriages. This woman single-handedly buried and gave funerals to more than 40 gay men at the height of the AIDS epidemic. Many victims were never claimed by their families due to stigmas surrounding the disease. On Christmas Eve in 2008, 45-year-old Bruce Jeffrey Pardo arrived at his ex-wife's house in California wearing a Santa Claus suit and carrying multiple firearms. When the front door was opened by an 8-year-old girl, he shot her in the face before opening fire at a crowded family Christmas party. Bruce then unleashed a homemade fuel dispensing device hidden inside a wrapped present, igniting a massive fire that trapped victims inside as the house burned. 9 people were killed, some by gunfire, and others burned so badly that it took investigators several days to identify them. The fire burned so intensely that parts of Bruce's Santa suit melted onto his skin, forcing him to flee while still on fire. He later drove to his brother's house, where he turned the gun on himself. Investigators later determined the attack was driven by rage over a recent divorce, mounting financial pressure after losing his job, and a bitter custody dispute, with Bruce specifically targeting his ex-wife and her family. Police discovered that he'd spent months preparing, stockpiling weapons, booby-trapping vehicles with explosives, and compiling a list of additional targets, including his ex-wife's divorce attorney, making the attack one of the most disturbing holiday massacres in U.S. history. While on his way to Toronto to film the second season of Gen V in March of 2024, actor Chance Perdomo tragically died in a single-vehicle motorcycle crash at just 27 years old. Authorities confirmed no other vehicles were involved, but never released the exact location, cause of the crash, weather condition, or road details, leaving the true circumstances unknown. Because he died alone, there were no public witnesses and no full incident report, sparking endless speculation among fans. Eerily, just days before the accident, he posted a photo of his motorcycle on Instagram with the ominous caption, "The final calm before the storm." His death impacted Gen V so heavily that production was postponed, and instead of recasting his character, the writers rewrote the entire season around his absence, a rare move that shows just how important and irreplaceable he was as an actor. In 1996, a stray mother cat in New York City became famous for performing one of the most heroic acts in animal rescue history. When the abandoned garage she and her newborn kittens were living in caught fire, she ran through the flames 5 separate times, carrying each kitten out one by one. By the time she saved the last one, her eyes were blistered shut, her ears and paws were burned, and her fur was scorched. But she touched each kitten with her nose to make sure they were all alive before collapsing unconscious. Nicknamed Scarlet, she later recovered at a veterinary hospital and was reunited with her kittens, all of whom survived. The story went viral worldwide, and the mother cat and all 5 of her babies were eventually adopted into loving homes. These extraterrestrial rocks were discovered in the sand of the Sahara. Libyan desert glass is one of the rarest minerals on Earth, and it's of unknown origin. Since only a celestial impact or a nuclear explosion would have resulted in such a geological anomaly. Pieces of the extremely rare mineral were even found in the tomb of King Tut. This is what Saturn would look like if it were as close to Earth as the Moon. It's been estimated that there are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on Earth. But there are more atoms in 1 grain of sand than there are stars in the universe. When Southern California was hit with a massive power outage in 1994, a bunch of LA residents began to call 911 about strange clouds hovering overhead. In reality, they were just seeing the Milky Way for the first time. In 2002, 2 airplanes collided over Germany, killing all 71 total passengers on board. 2 years later, the air traffic controller who was responsible was stabbed to death by a Russian man named Vitaly Kaloyev, whose wife and 2 kids were victims of the crash. Kaloyev was only sentenced to 2 years in prison and was hailed as a hero back in Russia. In 2019, a British teenager went blind after maintaining a horrendous diet for several years. It consisted of French fries, white bread, Pringles, and the occasional slice of ham. In 2013, Disney abandoned their policy of letting disabled people skip lines at their theme parks. This was because too many people were hiring disabled tour guides to help them skip the lines. Judith Barcy, the girl who voiced Ducky in The Land Before Time, was shot and killed by her own father in a murder-suicide in 1988. She was only 10 years old. This is what the end of a species looks like. A keeper in Sudan says goodbye to the last male white rhino in the world, 2018. This is the last photo ever taken of American freediver Nicholas Mavoli. He was attempting to freedive 236 feet deep. He completed the dive, surfaced, gave the OK sign, tried to speak, and then he passed out. He never regained consciousness and died later that day to pulmonary edema. This is a photo of Emmett Till's killers smiling after being acquitted of the brutal murder in 1955. Protected against double jeopardy, the next year the two men publicly admitted that they did indeed kill the 14-year-old boy. Princess Qajar of Persia was a national symbol of beauty in the early 1900s. It is said that more than 10 young men committed suicide because she rejected them. A researcher once played an audio recording of an elephant that had died to its herd. They went wild looking for him, and the elephant's daughter called for days afterward. Rock legend Dave Grohl has tried to live as frugally as possible after watching his mother suffer a stroke while filing her taxes. Famous philosopher Kurt Gödel had an obsessive fear of being poisoned, so he only ate food cooked by his wife. When his wife went to the hospital for an extended stay, Gödel stopped eating completely and promptly starved to death. If you're ever dared to swim in a tank that looks like this, say no. Aeration tanks have a much lower density than water and therefore very little buoyancy. This means if you fall into one, you will certainly drown. Ashley Martinson was abused by several of her mother's boyfriends throughout her childhood. The day after her 17th birthday, she killed her stepfather with a shotgun before stabbing her mother 30 times to death. She was sentenced to 23 years in prison, but says she feels safer and happier now than she ever did at home. In the early 2000s, CEO Stuart Parnell created a salmonella outbreak by purposely tainting his peanut products to save some cash. As a result of his greediness, 9 people died and hundreds of others got sick. This photo shows Parnell refusing to talk when a member of Congress challenges him to eat his own products in front of a committee. The Altamira man is an extremely well-preserved fossil of a Neanderthal who fell down a sinkhole over 100,000 years ago. Discovered in 1993, experts are still working on a way to extract the skeleton from the calcite without damaging it. Stephen King would do so much cocaine while writing that he had to stuff cotton up his nose to prevent blood from dripping onto his typewriter. There are various books that he doesn't even remember writing, including the 1981 classic Cujo. In 2011, 2 miners in Alberta, Canada accidentally stumbled upon a 110-million-year-old mummified dinosaur. The fossilized specimen, which was identified as a type of nodosaur, is so well preserved that its skin and scales are still completely intact. In its heyday, it would have looked something like this guy. Scientists say that it's likely the closest thing to a real-life dinosaur that humans have ever seen. In 1963, a Turkish man found a strange cave after he knocked down a wall in his home. Further digging revealed access to a complex tunnel system with more cave-like rooms. He had discovered the ancient underground city of Derinkuyu, built during the Byzantine period. Experts say the ancient city could have housed more than 20,000 people during its peak over 1,000 years ago. These are photos of former Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko before and after he was poisoned by Vladimir Putin in 2004. He and his family believe the assassination attempt was ordered because Yushchenko wanted Ukraine to integrate more with the rest of Europe. A doctor chronicled the progression of Alzheimer's disease in one of his patients by collecting her signatures on medical forms over the years. Ever since the Taliban takeover, the price for a kidney on the Afghan black market has dropped from $4,000 to $1,500. This is because so many people have been selling their own kidneys just so they can afford to feed their children. Such high supply of the organ has caused the price to plummet in short time. In 1966, a teenage boy was flying a kite in Brazil when he stumbled upon 2 dead bodies lying in the grass. Later identified as electronics technicians, the men were wearing matching formal suits, raincoats, and most bizarrely, homemade lead masks covering their eyes. One of them had a note in his pocket that read, "Be at the agreed place at 4:30. Take capsules after the effect. Protect metals. Await signal." There were no signs of violence, and no clear cause of death was ever determined. The capsules were never found, and toxicology reports proved inconclusive due to organ decomposition. The men had been seen acting nervous and paranoid in the days leading up to their deaths, while reportedly measuring distances in the hills and carrying around a notebook filled with strange codes and symbols. Their families later stated that the men had been obsessively studying obscure books on alchemy, spiritualism, and intense luminosity experiments. Their bizarre deaths remain a total mystery to this day. Kyle Marissa Roth blew up on TikTok for fearlessly exposing celebrity scandals using follower-submitted blind items. Despite her bold personality online, she was quietly battling serious health issues behind the scenes, reportedly suffering from chronic pain and illness that she never fully shared with her audience. But instead of letting it break her, she used it as fuel. Roth said that seeing other chronically ill people push through their struggles inspired her to keep making content. However, in April of 2024, she was suddenly found dead at just 36 years old, leaving millions of followers stunned and searching for answers. Even stranger, just days before she died, Roth had posted videos saying she was going through something but would explain soon. Her cause of death still hasn't publicly been released, but her family has asked for privacy and insisted that she was deeply loved. The woman who spent her life revealing secrets left the world with one of her own, but fans remember her not just for the drama she uncovered, but also for her humor, bravery, and the way she made people feel seen and entertained during their darkest days. During a trip to Africa in 1896, American taxidermist Carl Akeley survived a leopard attack by ramming his hand down the cat's throat and choking it to death. Today, Carl is known as the father of modern taxidermy for his innovative techniques, and is also remembered for inventing the nature dioramas that are popular at museums. A Russian kitchen worker named Zinaida Portnova is known for killing more than 100 Nazis by poisoning their food when she was only 16. While being interrogated by the Gestapo, she disarmed the Nazi detective and shot him in the head. She then murdered 2 more Nazis with the same gun before being killed while attempting to escape. Nicknamed Black Death, Henry Johnson was a member of the Harlem Hellfighters who single-handedly stopped a German ambush in World War I. Despite being stabbed, shot, and hit with a grenade, the 5'4" soldier injured or killed 24 German enemies without a working gun. He was the first American soldier to win a Croix de Guerre, France's highest honor for bravery. 2 days before his death, he said this:
"Every day that I have on earth is a gift and a blessing, and I'm very grateful for that. Because, frankly, people are disappearing. Scientists are going missing. Now they're saying they're going to investigate this. The president himself is saying they're going to look into this and see if anything's going on. It's a little bit scary."
That was David Wilcock, a paranormal author and Ancient Aliens contributor, known for claims about UFOs, hidden technology, and government cover-ups. In the video, he referenced a series of recent deaths and disappearances tied to researchers and scientists in space, energy, and defense fields that he and many others believed were connected. Just 2 days later, on April 20th, 2026, in Colorado, deputies responded to a crisis call. Authorities said Wilcock was found outside with a weapon and died shortly after police arrived. His death was officially ruled a suicide. In 2019, aboard the Disney Dream in the Atlantic Ocean, a 5-year-old girl climbed onto a porthole railing for a photo and fell nearly 50 feet into the ocean below. Her father jumped in after her seconds later, hitting the water hard before swimming to her and keeping her above the surface as the ship drifted on. With no flotation device and surrounded by open sea, they remained in the water until crew launched a rescue boat to pull them out. Both miraculously survived as the girl was treated for hypothermia, while her father suffered serious injuries including a fractured spine from the impact with the water. Morbid Facts, Part 69. A boy born with just 2% of his brain completely defied doctors' predictions after his brain grew back to 80% of the average size. Doctors had told the parents to terminate the pregnancy not once, but 5 times. The 8-year-old from England is the only known child to ever survive this condition. In order to keep Genghis Khan's burial a secret, all 2,000 plus people who attended his funeral were executed. The executioners were then killed by members of his escort, who eventually committed suicide when they reached their destination. 800 years later, the site still remains undiscovered to this day. In 1944, 14-year-old George Stinney Jr. was the youngest person ever to be executed in the United States. He was given the electric chair after being accused of murdering 2 young girls in South Carolina. He was exonerated 70 years after his execution in 2014 when a court ruled that he had not received a fair trial. David Reimer was a Canadian man who was raised as a girl after a botched circumcision led to a sex reassignment surgery before he was 2. Upon realizing he was not a girl, Reimer started living as a male at age 15. But after years of suffering from severe depression, he committed suicide at age 38. In 1997, the Cat in the Hat Thanksgiving Day Parade float careened out of control due to high winds, knocking a lamppost into the head of Kathleen Carana, putting her in a month-long coma. She sued Macy's and the city for $395 million and ended up settling for an undisclosed amount in 2001. Kathleen eventually purchased a nice New York City apartment with the settlement money, but just 5 years later, Yankees pitcher Corey Lidle crashed his plane into her building and the engine ended up in her bedroom. Luckily, the crash happened just minutes before Kathleen was due to arrive home, but Lidle and his flight instructor were both killed while 21 others in the building were injured. Adding to the weirdness of this story, the flight instructor's friend was also supposed to be on this flight but got stuck in traffic and told them to leave without him. So he managed to escape death until just 1 month later when he was killed in a separate plane crash. Playboy model Anna Nicole Smith didn't receive a single penny when her 90-year-old billionaire husband died. Oil tycoon J. Howard Marshall never included her in his will and left his $1.6 billion estate to his son. If you receive the wrong blood type for a transfusion, one of the symptoms is a sense of impending doom. The Roman Emperor Nero accidentally killed his pregnant wife by kicking her to death. He then found a young boy who looked exactly like her, castrated him, and married him. In 1771, a Scottish woman was sentenced to death by hanging for the crime of hiding a pregnancy. Maggie Dixon was hung, declared dead, and carted off in a wooden coffin. She then suddenly woke up on the way to the graveyard and was later released since her sentence had been carried out. She lived for another 40 years, known as half-hanging. Don't watch this one unless you're ready to cry. In 1939, a mentally disabled 23-year-old man named Joe Arity was falsely accused of the rape and murder of a teenage girl. He was sentenced to death in Colorado, and the moments leading to his execution are nothing short of heartbreaking. Joe was known for playing with a toy train given to him by the warden, who called Joe the happiest prisoner on death row. It was clear, however, that Joe didn't understand the situation or his impending execution. For his last meal, he requested ice cream and even saved some for after the execution. He was reported to have smiled while being brought to the gas chamber and was only momentarily nervous until the warden grabbed his hand and reassured him. Arity was officially pardoned 72 years after his death, after evidence had proven that he was coerced into confession. In Osaka, Japan, 23-year-old cosplayer Saki Sato was arrested after police say she cut off part of her 21-year-old boyfriend's ring finger with a hatchet and stored it inside the refrigerator. Authorities allege she had previously cut off his left nipple with scissors and exerted extreme control over his finances and phone. The victim himself eventually contacted police, leading officers to discover the preserved finger. Sato denied intentionally mutilating him, claiming he hurt himself, but prosecutors charged her with multiple counts of assault. If convicted, she faces significant prison time under Japan's criminal injury statutes. In August of 2010, dismissed Filipino officer Rolando Mendoza hijacked a tour bus carrying Hong Kong visitors in Manila, demanding his job be reinstated after corruption charges. The standoff dragged on for nearly 11 hours and was broadcast live, with negotiations collapsing after Mendoza's brother, who was trying to mediate, was arrested by authorities. As tensions escalated, Mendoza opened fire on the hostages, while police launched a chaotic rescue attempt that drew heavy criticism for poor coordination. The crisis ended when a police sniper finally killed Mendoza, but 8 tourists were dead and several others injured, sparking diplomatic fallout between Hong Kong and the Philippines. At SummerSlam 1997, Stone Cold Steve Austin suffered a serious neck injury after Owen Hart botched a reverse piledriver, slamming Austin's head directly into the mat. The impact caused a bruised spinal cord and temporary paralysis, leaving Austin unable to move. He immediately told Hart, "Don't touch me, I can't move," and relayed the same to the referee, who signaled Owen to stall for time. Austin eventually regained just enough movement to finish the match with a weak roll-up. Though he continued wrestling, the injury forced Austin to abandon his technical style, and chronic neck issues ultimately led to his early retirement in 2003. Shockingly, just a year later in 1998, Owen Hart botched another piledriver, this time on Dan Severn during a live episode of Raw, causing another serious neck injury that briefly left Severn unable to move. The back-to-back incidents helped solidify the piledriver's reputation as one of wrestling's most dangerous moves and led to stricter safety protocols in the WWE. South Korean actor Jo Son is known for playing Random Task in the first Austin Powers movie. But in 2008, he was sentenced to 7 years in prison for torturing and essaying a female victim on Christmas Day. 3 years later, 27 years were added onto his sentence after he murdered his cellmate. In 2019, Florida man Grant Amato murdered his mother, father, and brother and tried to stage it as a murder-suicide committed by his brother. But police didn't buy his story when they found out his parents were threatening to kick him out of their house over his severe porn addiction. He had stolen over $200,000 from them and spent it all on a cam model from Bulgaria. In 1916, a Tennessee circus elephant named Mary murdered her handler by crushing his head on his second day of the job. The circus owner then decided to publicly execute the 6,000-pound elephant by hanging her from a crane. After she was killed in front of a crowd of 2,500 men, women, and children, an autopsy revealed that she had a severely infected tooth that was likely the cause of her murderous rage. Brendan Fraser's brief collapse was driven by years of physical destruction, psychological breakdown, and what many believe was a Hollywood blacklist. At the height of his career, he was performing nearly all of his own stunts, which led to multiple herniated discs, spinal compression, a fractured pelvis, and repeated surgeries that left him in constant pain. In 1999, Fraser nearly died during the filming of The Mummy when a hanging stunt went horribly wrong and the rope was pulled too tightly, cutting off blood flow to his brain and causing him to lose consciousness. He later said doctors told him he came dangerously close to serious brain injury or death. Around the same time, he endured the passing of his mother, a financially devastating divorce, and severe depression. Brendan later alleged he was sexually assaulted by a powerful Hollywood executive in 2003, and after speaking about it privately, his career abruptly stalled. Many believe he was quietly blacklisted as major roles vanished almost overnight, leaving him to describe himself as invisible for years while living in pain and isolation. After roughly a 15-year hiatus, Fraser ultimately rebuilt his life and career, returning to Hollywood on his own terms and finding renewed stability and appreciation from fans. In 1961, 5-year-old Nancy Brewster got a lump on her neck and was eventually too sick to go to school. So her deeply religious family brought her to a Christian practitioner who simply prayed for her and said that her illness was an illusion. When she died horribly 2 years later, there was no funeral and the family never spoke of her again. If you ever have to sneeze, just let it rip. In 2018, a British man blew a hole in his throat by holding his nose and mouth shut while sneezing. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks and lucky to be alive. Alexander Litvinenko was a former Russian spy who heavily criticized Vladimir Putin. In 2006, he was quickly rushed to the hospital after being poisoned with a cup of tea in a London hotel. Working with Scottish detectives as he lay dying, he was able to trace the lethal substance to one of his former comrades in the Russian Secret Service, thus solving his own murder case. This elderly woman from Brooklyn is a hoarder who also happens to be legally blind. At some point in the 1990s, her son who lived in the house disappeared. In 2016, his fully clothed skeleton was found in a room filled with garbage. She had been living with his corpse for 20 years. These are just some of the reasons why people used to be committed to mental asylums. In 2006, 5-year-old Robert Turner called 911 after his mother collapsed in her bedroom. But the operator hung up after asking him to put an adult on the phone and assuming it was a prank. 3 hours later, he called 911 again and another operator told him to stop prank calling. This time, police were sent to the home where they found that the mother of 10 had died from a heart attack. Ever since she was a little girl, Jewel Shooping wanted to be blind. So in 2006, she poured drain cleaner into her eyes and blinded herself. She says that she is happier than ever after fulfilling her lifelong wish. Less than 24 hours after you die, your pet cat will start eating your face. Charlie No Face was an urban legend in Pennsylvania who used to walk along the side of highways at night. In reality, he was a man named Raymond Robinson who was left badly disfigured after a childhood electrocution accident. He only went out at night so his face wouldn't scare people, and he was said to be a friendly and well-liked man. This clip from a 1995 talk show would later become key evidence in a murder case.
Let's have John come out here and see who has the crush on him. Here's John. Did you think Donna had the crush on you?
Did I? No, we're good friends.
Well, guess what? It's Scott that has the crush on you.
You lied to me.
1995, 32-year-old Scott Amador appeared on The Jenny Jones Show to reveal a secret crush on his longtime friend Jonathan Schmitz. Before the taping, producers had reportedly told Schmitz that a woman had a crush on him, not that the admirer would actually be his male friend. When the truth was revealed on stage, Schmitz appeared to take the surprise in stride and even laughed it off in front of the studio audience. But after the episode was recorded, he apparently became deeply embarrassed by the public revelation. Just 3 days later in Michigan, Schmitz bought a shotgun, drove to Amador's home, and shot him twice in the chest, killing him instantly. He then called 911 and confessed to the shooting. Schmitz was later convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison, eventually being released on parole in 2017. The killing, which became known as the Jenny Jones murder, sparked a nationwide debate about the ethics of 1990s ambush-style talk shows and the use of the so-called gay panic defense in court. After a failed circumcision led to a sex reassignment surgery, David Reimer was raised as a girl. Once he found out that he was in fact not a girl, Reimer started living as a male at the age of 15. But after years of suffering from severe depression and confusion, Reimer took his own life at the age of 38. Many shelters won't allow black cats to be adopted around Halloween time, out of fear that they might be tortured or sacrificed. In many cities across the U.S., people on the sex offender registry have to keep their outdoor lights off during Halloween. This is a 1948 photo of a Chicago mother hiding her face in shame after putting her children up for sale. 2 of them were sold to an abusive family for $2 apiece so that their mother could afford rent. Their new father would often tie them up in a barn and force them to work long hours, often referring to them as slaves. An Argentinian farmer found 4 20,000-year-old fossilized glyptodons on his property. Glyptodons were a species of armadillo that were the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. You might remember these guys from Ice Age the movie. This 2,500-year-old artifact was found in Istanbul, and many believe it to depict a modern-day space capsule. This iron helmet, dating back to the 10th century, was discovered in Norway in 1943. It is the only complete Viking helmet ever found, and against popular opinion, there was never any proof that Vikings wore horns on their helmets. This was the moment when a routine day on the slope suddenly spiraled into chaos, when a chairlift at Georgia's Gadori Ski Resort malfunctioned and began racing backward down the mountain. The lift reversed at high speed, smashing chairs together at the bottom terminal and violently throwing riders to the ground, while others were forced to jump to avoid being crushed by swinging metal seats. Screams erupted as people piled at the base of the lift, with some narrowly missing being struck by flying chairs and bodies. At least 8 people were seriously injured, including tourists from several countries, with reported injuries ranging from broken limbs to head and spinal trauma. Investigators later concluded the rollback was triggered by an electrical failure, which was only worsened by operator error after emergency procedures were not properly followed. In the aftermath, the lift operator was suspended and resort managers were forced to resign. Criminal and civil investigations later followed, examining how a system designed to keep riders safe turned into a death trap within seconds. In 2013, 16-year-old Ethan Couch killed 4 people while drunk driving, but he initially wasn't sentenced to any jail time since his attorney argued that he suffered from affluenza, a mental illness caused by growing up with too much money. In ancient Sparta, only 2 groups of people could have their names inscribed on their tombstones: men who died in battle and women who died in childbirth. In 1994, Los Angeles police arrested a man dressed as the Grim Reaper carrying a scythe. He was reported by various nursing homes after staring through patients' windows while wearing the costume. In the year 2000, the charred remains of Mary Lou Morris were found in her burned-out car in Houston, Texas. Only 4 days later, the body of Mary McGinnis Morris was found in her burned-out car in Houston, Texas. Police believe that a hitman killed the wrong Mary Morris and tried to fix it. 23-year-old Arizona man Christopher Todd Eric died following a mental health crisis and was mistakenly recorded as unclaimed due to a clerical error, according to his family's allegations. Years later, his mother said she recognized his preserved body inside a public anatomical exhibit, where it had been plastinated and displayed without her knowledge or consent. She's since pursued legal action seeking to recover his remains and challenge how unclaimed bodies are processed, sparking debate over consent, medical displays, and the ethical handling of human remains. A Connecticut man survived a horrific workplace accident after his arm became trapped inside an industrial furnace for 3 days. As circulation failed and tissue began to decay, he reportedly tried to amputate his own arm using a saw blade after noticing the smell of rotting flesh, but he lost consciousness from pain before he was able to finish. Concerned when he failed to show up for work, a friend contacted authorities, and rescuers eventually freed him, preventing a more than likely fatal outcome. Keanu Reeves' sister Kim was diagnosed with the deadly blood cancer leukemia in 1991. In response, he sold his home to move closer to her, cleaned her house, cooked her meals, and provided all of her necessary medications. Once she recovered, Keanu started a private charity to fund cancer research in children's hospitals. In 2009, he was interviewed saying, "I don't like to attach my name to it, I just let the foundation do what it does." Frank Sinatra died the night of Seinfeld's finale, and his ambulance made it to the hospital in record time since there was no traffic due to everyone watching the show. Hans Scharf, the most successful Nazi interrogator in World War II, never physically harmed an enemy soldier. Instead, he treated them with respect and kindness, taking them for walks, letting them visit their captured comrades in the hospital, and even letting captured pilots go on test flights. His methods were very successful since virtually everyone ended up talking. In 2006, 40-year-old actress Adrienne Shelley was found dead in her apartment bathroom, hanging from a shower rod in the bathtub with a bedsheet around her neck. Though initially ruled a suicide, it was later determined that Shelley was murdered by a construction worker who was trying to rob her. After breaking into her home, the 19-year-old had accidentally knocked her unconscious while covering her mouth to prevent her from screaming, but decided to kill her and make it look like a suicide out of fear of getting caught and sent back to Ecuador since he was an illegal immigrant. When the Goths attacked Constantinople in 378 AD, they were left stunned when one of the defenders stormed out of the city completely naked, decapitated one of the attackers, and proceeded to drink the blood flowing from his neck. Shortly after witnessing this, the Goths retreated in horror. During a 1900 college football game in San Francisco, hundreds of fans climbed on the roof of a glass factory to watch the game. But the roof wasn't built to support so much weight and eventually collapsed, dumping the fans into a scorching hot glass furnace where 22 of them died horribly and hundreds more were injured. Despite the tragedy, the game was never paused. Sonny Graham was dying of heart failure when he got the call about a new heart. The donor was 33-year-old Terry Cottle, who had just committed suicide by shooting himself in the throat with a shotgun. After a successful transplant, Sonny started writing to Terry's widow Cheryl. The two ended up falling in love and getting married. Soon, people started to notice that Sonny was taking on some of Terry's personality and characteristics. He started liking things that he never enjoyed before, like beer and hot dogs, which were some of Terry's favorites. 12 years later, Sonny committed suicide the exact same way as Terry, with a shotgun to the throat. 5 members of the Trinidad family died when Alvin Hubbard crashed into the family minivan, leaving Mother Mary Rose as the only survivor. Alvin claimed the crash was caused by a coughing fit, and he only received 1 year probation since prosecutors couldn't find any evidence of reckless conduct. After the sentencing, Mary Rose said it was as if her family was killed all over again. There's a Mickey Mouse comic strip from 1930 in which Minnie leaves Mickey for another mouse. In response, Mickey proceeds to attempt suicide in various ways. On Friday the 13th in October 1972, a plane carrying 45 people crashed into the Andes Mountains. Faced with radio reports that the search for them had been abandoned, the survivors had to resort to eating their friends. 16 remaining survivors were finally rescued 72 days after the initial crash. This is why you should never put your feet on a car's dashboard. 22-year-old Grain Healy had her legs propped up when the airbag went off and forced both of her feet into her skull, breaking almost every bone in her face. As a result of her injuries, part of her skull was removed and she lived without a forehead for 2 years. Celestis Incorporated is a company that will send your cremated remains into space. For a price ranging from $1,000 to $15,000, you have the option of being launched into deep space, to the moon, or into Earth's orbit. In the 9th century, the corpse of a pope was put on trial and found guilty. His 7-month-old skeleton had 3 fingers removed and was thrown into a river with weights tied to it. In 2024 in Los Angeles, California, 23-year-old YouTuber Tumad, whose real name was Medea Sadiq, was found dead inside his home after a welfare check was requested when he'd gone silent for several days. Authorities discovered his body in a state of decomposition, indicating he had likely been dead for some time before anyone realized. The death was later linked to a suspected drug overdose, with reports of substances found at the scene. In the months leading up to his death, Tumad had posted increasingly erratic and concerning content online, including references to drug use and disturbing behavior. Despite having millions of followers and a massive online presence, he died alone unnoticed until the smell coming from his residence prompted concern. Donald Miller disappeared in Ohio in 1986 to escape debt and alcoholism, and was declared legally dead in 1994 so his ex-wife could collect Social Security benefits for their children. Years later, he resurfaced and appeared in court in 2013 asking to be declared alive again. The judge ruled that under Ohio law, a death declaration cannot be reversed after 3 years, meaning that despite standing in the courtroom alive, Miller was legally considered dead. As a result, he was left unable to get a driver's license, Social Security number, or legally work, effectively existing outside the system with no clear way to reverse his status. Julie Andrews had one of the most iconic voices in Hollywood history, but one botched surgery destroyed it forever. Known for Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music, her flawless 4-octane soprano was considered untouchable. But in 1997, a simple procedure to remove harmless nodules went horribly wrong. Surgeons permanently mutilated her vocal cords, leaving her in agonizing pain just to speak. Andrews later sued the hospital and won, but no lawsuit could undo the damage, as the world's most beloved singing voice was silenced forever. This NASA scientist helped land humans on the moon, but his rockets were first built with slave labor in Nazi death camps. Werner von Braun, the celebrated architect of the Apollo missions, once ran the V-2 rocket program for Adolf Hitler. The rockets were manufactured using prisoners from the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp, who were typically starved, beaten, and worked until they died. Conditions were so brutal that over 20,000 prisoners were killed while making the rockets, far more than the rockets ever killed in combat. But after the war, von Braun wasn't punished. Instead, the US secretly brought him to America under Operation Paperclip, erased most of his Nazi past, and turned him into a national hero. Rama Haruna was born in Nigeria in 1996 and appeared healthy at birth, but at around 6 months old she suddenly became ill and her body stopped developing normally. As she got older, most of her body stopped growing and she lost the ability to sit or stand, leaving her with a severely shortened torso and almost no functioning limbs. While her body remained extremely small, her head continued to grow and age normally, creating a striking contrast that doctors were never able to fully explain. Because she couldn't move on her own, Rama's family often carried her around in a large plastic bucket so she could leave the house. Despite constant pain, she remained mentally sharp and spoke about wanting to live a normal life. She died in 2016 at the age of 19 after living her entire life with the unexplained condition. In the 1840s, Anarcha Westcott, an enslaved black woman, was forced to undergo about 30 experimental gynecological surgeries performed by Dr. J. Marion Sims, who was later known as the father of modern gynecology. Sims was apparently trying to repair childbirth injuries called fistulas, and the procedures were carried out without anesthesia at a time when many physicians believed African Americans couldn't feel pain. Although his techniques influenced early gynecology, Anarcha has come to symbolize how much medical advancement was built on the suffering of enslaved women. Today, she's remembered as one of the mothers of gynecology, not for a discovery she chose, but for what she was forced to endure.